Hello, Facebook land. I wasn't planning on doing a live video today, but I actually had shared a story with a friend in a voicemail, and then she reflected it back to me, and I was like, oh yeah, that story. And there's this piece that is just so important in life, absolutely. I don't know, I didn't want to say as entrepreneurs, but like as anyone who has a vision or a dream to bring into the world, anyone who's been called to something, um, that this process of those dreams, those callings, those visions, those offers, whatever they are, uh, that process of bringing those things to fruition is often incredibly like spiral and circuitous, and the path itself is often very winding. And sometimes there's like thickets to go through, and we're not even sure we're on the right path. And wait, does this path even lead to the vision I was thinking? And how do I, all these things. And so I wanted to tell this story. I've talked a lot more recently about some pieces of the Return to Source journey, Return to Source being a retreat that I lead for women on land near Mount Shasta. And so there's pieces of that I've really spoken to, and the profound impact of that. But I've been speaking a little bit more to the fruition of it. And then I forgot this other piece of this story. So I want to tell this story, and welcome to all of you who are joining. Welcome to anyone who's watching the replay. I love your comments, your questions, your shares. Any way this relates to your life, a question about how it relates to your life or your specific dream or vision, anything about that. I would love to include that. And as I wanted to say, I really welcome that as I dive into this story. So the story really begins about 14 years ago when I very first went to this land near Mount Shasta. And this piece of land itself is called Headwaters Outdoor School. You can Google it. They do incredible programs. They're incredible people. I have been now going to this land at least once a year, every year for the last 14 years. And the teacher who teaches on that land, his name is Tim Corcoran. He has a book called I think Growing Up with a Heart Full of Nature, or Soul, maybe Growing with a Soul Full of Nature. Extraordinary teacher. One of the reasons that I love to bring people up there is that I love to introduce them to Tim, because he is incredible and profound. But this story really isn't about Return to Source. This year, Return to Source is actually already sold out, but this process that I went through is so profound, and it so speaks to how, like, what is this winding path of bringing things to fruition that so many of us go through, and then I think judge ourselves for. So I was on this land, and one of the things that we used to do and still do at Headwaters is a sweat lodge. And this was the first sweat lodge I had ever sat with Tim. And somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the dark, somewhere like in the midst of the heat, these words came right into my mind, just like this. For me, this is one of the ways that wisdom, intuition, guidance, whatever you want to call it, speak to me. So in mine, they come in through the top and they go out through the front. So for other people, there's like, I was talking to a man the other day and his goes like, boop, right there. So whatever yours is, I'm just going to make a little side note, is listen to the way that it comes to you. So mine came right like this, and it said, you're meant to bring people onto this land. And I was like, okay. And so I listened to that. I didn't know what that meant. It was my very first opportunity of being on the land. I didn't really know what that meant. And in my own self, also, there was this desire to specifically bring women onto that land. So that in that year, my partner at the time and I, both of us, we did start bringing people up to that land. And over the next number of years, we sort of consistently did that. There was just this desire, like, how do we bring people up here? How do we do work up here? Do we just bring people up here on retreat? Are we charging money for this? There was something there. You're meant land. And there, since the very, very beginning for me, and this remains true, I've had this knowing, like, all I need to do is get them there. And that in and of itself is enough. Like, I just got to get the people onto this land, and then there's this transformative experience that's available. And for these last 14 years, like, in all the different forms that it's taken, it's like, it's all the way at Mount Shasta, and people resist the driving and the travel, and they have kids, and then there's camping, and it's hard, and is this how they want to spend their money, or their family vacation, or there's so much resistance. And in me, there have been times when I'm just like, just keep getting them to the land, like, whatever it takes, just keep getting them to the land. And then other times where I'm like, fuck this. Like, I shouldn't have to try this hard. This is the best thing in the entire universe. Like, people should just fucking come. Like, just trust me. I'm so sick of trying to get people here. And then every time they come, they're like, this is amazing. This is the best place. Like, oh my God, I want to do this all the time. I'm like, yeah, I know. Just fucking trust me. So this is like part of the circuitous path, right? And I think it was maybe not the very first year that I was up there, but it was within the first 2 years that I was like, okay, so I'm going to lead my own retreat here, and I'm going to do a women's retreat because that would be so powerful. And this is 12, 13 years ago, and 3 women signed up. And that just was like, it wasn't even enough. So like, I invited a man. So it wasn't even a women's retreat. It was me and like 3 other women and a man. And, we had a beautiful time because this land is incredible. And to be on the land with so few people was incredible. But it was so not the fulfillment. Like, I had my own judgments about how it went and why don't people want to come and why do I have to work so hard? And there's only 3 women and one, I had to bring a man to what I wanted to be a women's retreat. But I will say, so we did Sweat Lodge. And I had one of the most powerful sweat lodges I've ever had in this tiny, we invited some of the apprentices that Tim was working with, who were these like 12 or 13-year-old boys. And it was fucking phenomenal experience. It was one of the hottest sweat lodges I've ever done. And it was just a phenomenal experience. And so I continued, right? Like, okay, what is this? I didn't try to do another women's retreat right away. But every year we've gone, and over time has developed this pretty consistent, once a year in June, we do like a friends and family event that used to be like the company that I started with my ex-husband, Authentic World. It was kind of like an Authentic World retreat, and then it became less of an Authentic World retreat and more of a family retreat, and all the different iterations. And the reason I say this again is that so many of us have like a thing. And it comes to us and it's clear as day, this thing, I'm meant to do this thing. And then we try to do it. And like that first women's retreat I did up there with me and 3 women and 1 man, it quote unquote fails. And it's so easy to do one of 2 things. And one is to give up, like, well, that didn't work. I guess I'm not really meant to do that, or people don't want it, or some version of that. Like, I guess I just shouldn't do it because that didn't work. Or to just like push, like, well, I should just do another one or charge less, or like, so that one is to sort of collapse, and the other is to be stubborn in the face of it, rather than like, for me, the way that I responded to that was, how do I stick with the calling? You're meant to bring people to this land. But just do like the next small thing of how do I stick with this calling? How do I keep putting one foot in front of the other without knowing quite where the path is going, not always being able to see it. Is this really the path? Just like, okay, but I'm meant to do that. I am meant to be on this land, and I'm meant to bring people to this land. And so, in some way, how can I listen to what is being called for without either like giving up because I failed or just getting stubborn and like, mad about it and pushing for it? And then I remember, I think it's 5 years this fall. I have a hard time tracking this, but I think it's 5 years ago this fall. I went to like a large kind of leadership intensive with a coach and a teacher. And in the middle of that, I was reminded of this vision that I had about bringing women to that land. And I remember I went up and I talked to I was like in tears. I don't even know if I made sense. I like just wanted to tell him my vision, and I was crying, and I was like, I have this vision and I want to bring like women CEOs, and I want to connect them to the land, and there's this powerful experience, and I want us to be covered in mud, and I want it to be these powerful women, but they like connect to the land, and we do sweat light. I had this thing, and I was crying, and he was like, okay, like sounds amazing. um like, what are you going to do about it, sort of thing. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, I don't know. And at that time, I was solo parenting two really small children, and I couldn't really do that. But again, one foot in front of the other, like I kept bringing people to that land in some way, and I kept going. And my children have been on that land every year of their life, and I have continued to just know, like, there's something important, not only for me personally, but about me continuing to bring people. And partly as an act of like devotion to whatever this calling is, partly as an act of devotion literally to the land, partly as an act of devotion to my teacher on that land. Like, okay, I'm just meant to keep doing this the best I can. And so that was like 5 years ago. And then not last year, but the fall of the year before, so 2 years ago in the fall, again, I put together a women's retreat. And that was the very first time that Return to Source was meant to happen, that I intended it. And I think when I was there in June at the Friends and Family Retreat that we've been doing annually, I was like, all right, like, I'm ready again. This is right. This is totally the right time. Like, I have got to get women in the sweat lodge here. And so I put it out, and like went through the process of creating and putting out and choosing dates with the land and with my teacher and getting people there. And I believe it's somewhere between 10 and like 14 women signed up. And it was meant to be in September. Let's see, we're in 2020, 2019, 20, I think it was 2018. It was like September of 2018. And there were forest fires in Northern California and things, but all leading up to it, I was watching this, and we were still good to go, and there were no fires there, and it wasn't threatened. And even though I was like getting questions from the women, like, is this happening? Like, what's going on with the fires? Because they were coming from, all over in the United States. I don't know if anyone was coming international. I don't think so. And I was like, yes, we're a go. And then literally the morning that we were supposed to like drive up there and it was supposed to start, I get a call from my teacher. He's like, I don't know, Kendra, like we had this new fire and we're not threatened, but like, I don't know if it's such a good idea for these women to come up here. Like, I do the best I can. And because he's just got this big, generous heart. And I looked at it and I was like, no, this is not right. I can't bring women from all over the country to this place where they're just going to be in the midst of like smoke and forest fires. And I was literally calling women and telling them not to get on planes at the airport. Don't come. A couple women already had flown. They got return flights. I set up a group video call like this so that we could just check in, be together, set intention as a group of women who had intended to be together. And and released that into the world. Like, holy shit, like, didn't happen. And over the next probably week or so, chose these new dates with my teacher that were for the spring. It was for May of 2019. And I refunded all the women who were meant to come in that September time. Some of the women on my team said like, no, 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 you should just, give them the next one, like just sign them up for that one. And there was something in me that knew like the way the fire happened and the way it all happened. I was like, no, we're just gonna, the event didn't happen. I refund everybody and then they can re-register. And that's what felt right to me. And so then as soon as I got new dates and I set it up, and about half the women signed up for the new one. Some of them I never heard from again. Some of them were women I had never met, and I never heard from them again, and who knows. And I made sort of my stake in the ground for Return to Source May 2019. And again, this is, somewhere between 10 and 12 years after my very first time being on the land, and this vision, like this sort of calling coming straight in and said, you're meant to bring people to this land. 12 years after that, I put this stake in the ground and I was like, 10 women. And whether I get 10 women or not, that's what I pay for. I'm going to pay the land and pay my teacher. And that's kind of my stake in the ground, that I'm going to make that happen. And I believe we had 14 women at Return to Source in May of 2019, and it happened, and they showed up, and I was bringing some of the women who came had been long-term students of mine, and I brought them a day early to show them so that they could help me. And it was like this something being nourished inside me that was the fulfillment of a deep, deep dream. Showing them where we get water straight out of the ground, and just the place that I know is so magical, but I've been coming back now for 14 years. And so almost lose a little bit of like, holy shit, this is amazing. Seeing it through their eyes and being able to bring these women that I love onto this land was like nourishing in a way that I couldn't even have predicted. I was like, oh my God, this is happening. And that I kept waiting. I was on the land for 24 hours before the participants arrived, and I kept waiting. I was like, what am I meant to teach here? What am I going to offer? How is this weekend going to go? And all I kept hearing from the land was, just bring them onto the land. Just get them here, which was so resonant with the very first calling. You're meant to bring people to this land. And then they came, and just the offering of that, the fulfillment, I thought like, oh, this is happening. Yes, this is a annual event. I can do Return to Source. I can do it at this time. I can bring women here and continue in this way. And then I watched, coming into the beginning of 2020 and knowing that I was going to be offering Return to Source 2020 and continuing to follow this calling. And I sort of watched in awe. And again, it's not like I haven't done anything to make this happen. But also, as Return to Source 2020, filled to the 14 that we had for the first year, and then just like kept going. And I had kind of thrown that what I thought was a bold or daring. I was like, wouldn't it be fun to have 30? Like, let's just have 30 women up there. That'd be so cool, But I was like, yeah, if we get to 15, the same number we had last, like I'll be totally fucking thrilled. And then I watched surpass that, and then I watched us getting close to 30, and I was like, oh shit, we gotta close the cart here. There's gonna be this, and I watched as we sold out in the early bird registration in February, which is what, March, April, May, 3 months before the event, and I watched as I closed the cart and announced it sold out, people reach out, and it was people asking things like, oh my God, I wanted to give this as a gift to my wife and her best friend. Can I please still register? And I was just like, oh, of course, I want to, these are the women who should be there. And it just reminded me what it really means to stay committed to a vision, and that we don't always know how long it will take or what exactly it will look like. And so I know it's funny for me to say this because I'm like, sounds weird. Like, I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing about this, but I know there are people who watch and project things, seeing that I filled Return to Source, in the early bird period, that there's 30 plus women coming, and they're like, how did she do that? And she had, this, just like, she's successful, like that's a thing, like I am that, like I've always been like that, like it's been easier, like I just decided to do Return to Source. And some people might see, oh, it's just the second year and it's sold out, and they don't see that 14 years ago that 14 years ago, I sat in that sweat lodge and had those words come in. You're meant to bring people to this land. And something in me just said, yes, okay, I will do that. And that over these last 14 years, something in me has said, how do I do that now? And how do I do that now? How do I keep sticking with it, but in a way that honors me and my life and where I'm at and what I'm capable of, and sort of looks at that, and that people don't see that then, what, 12 or 13 years ago, I tried to do a women's retreat and had 3 women and a man. And that don't see that then I dropped it, and then that I had 2 kids, and then that I just did the best I could coming to the land and continuing to bring people there. That none of that is like, you can't see that when you just see me offer Return to Source 2020, and over the course of 3 weeks 30 women sign up. And so I say this, not so much to like give hope, like false hope, like, yes, your dreams will come true, just stick with it. Like, I don't know. But I do believe that when we have those true dreams or visions or something that is beyond, like, I want this, but that's something about how we're meant to truly offer. That if we keep taking step by step and we keep staying in relationship with, how do I do that now? And how can I stay intimate with that vision now? That we will see the fruits of commitment and devotion to our deepest dreams and our biggest visions. And so partly I just put this out there as like something to, like a blessing. I put this out here as a blessing upon any of you who are in the midst perhaps of thinking that you failed, or not knowing how to take the next step, or just a blessing, some solace on those parts of ourselves. And also, because this is why I work with women in the Fierce Grace Incubator in this way, because this is not a business plan, although it includes strategic action. And these are not like the kind of goals, this is a really different way of creating and cultivating and tending and bringing to fruition our deepest dreams, the gifts that we have to offer the world. And sometimes those are our businesses or our teachings, or the way we want to offer our gifts in that way. And sometimes these are other kinds of dreams and other kinds of offers into the world. It's how we offer our art into the world, or we have social justice organizations or communities that we need to birth into the world, or ways that we want to hold them, or how are we going to tend them? How are we going to offer these voices, or stay committed to a dream that we have about a way that we can birth that kind of vision. And that is what the Fierce Grace Incubator is for. So there is room for, I believe, 6 more women in the Fierce Grace Incubator, which begins April 30th. And I'll put a link to the application and a little brief synopsis of that in the comments, So if that calls to you in any way, if you hear this story and there's just some part of you that lights up like, yes, that's how I want to work, and I want some holding and some guidance in that, then, and you're also a woman identified, then I invite you to reach out, and I would be honored to hold your dreams in that way. Sending you much love.